It is the fight of our lives, and we are losing. That is according to the United Nations Secretary General, as he describes the battle against climate change. Antonio Guterres opened COP27 in Egypt just last hour, as you heard live on our program, with an address to world leaders and delegates. He urged them to take action now before the damage becomes irreversible.
The deadly impacts of climate change are here and now. Loss and damage can no longer be swept under the rug. It is a moral imperative. It is a fundamental question of international solidarity and climate justice. Let's not forget that the war on nature is itself a massive violation of human rights.
So there you see, after that opening address, the world leaders as they gather for what's become known as the family photo. This meeting following the release of a new UN climate report that says the past 8 years are set to be the warmest on record. Secretary General Guterres calls that report a chronicle of climate chaos and says the only solution is ambitious, credible action. Let's bring in Chris Brown, who is covering COP27 for us live there in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. Chris, welcome. Looking forward to your reporting as always. We were just listening to the opening address from the UN Secretary General. Talk, if you would, about the messages from Antonio Guterres and how it reflects what is on the table for this summit.
Well, Heather, it's obviously getting harder and harder to shock people with words about the impact of climate change on communities. We're seeing it all the time on the news, floods, droughts, all sorts of extreme weather. And yet that is the task for Antonio Guterres, is to come here and try to shock people to actually do more, try to shock governments and try to shock leaders. He said putting climate on the back burner because of other challenges, alluding to, I believe, the war in Ukraine is unacceptable, outrageous, and self-defeating. Let's hear a little bit more.
The science is clear. Any hope of limiting temperature rise to 1.5 degrees means achieving global net zero emissions by 2050. But that 1.5 degree goal is on life support and the machines are rattling. We are getting dangerously close to the point of no return.
Well, Heather, there are 100 global leaders here. You can often hear their jets flying low over this venue as the runway is very close to where the COP27 delegates are. It's extremely significant, I think, that it is here in Egypt and the presence of African nations very strong, very, very visible. Obviously, this continent has suffered extreme problems from climate change, a drought in the Horn of Africa, terrible flooding in Nigeria. It has 18% of the world's population, but contributes just 3% of all the greenhouse gas emissions. So that gives you a sense of the imbalance, the climate injustice that the UN chief was referring to. At the last COP in Glasgow, there were all sorts of promises made, money put forward to try to address this imbalance. So as this event begins here, the message over and over again, particularly from the Egyptian hosts, was we have to hold these northern countries to their promises.
In terms of promises and money, Chris, we do expect that one of the major focal points for COP27 is going to be loss and damage and compensation. On those fronts, what should we be listening for?
It's a very complicated issue. You can sort of think of it as almost like pain and suffering, if you will. And it's different from another sort of fund of money which already exists called adaptation and mitigation. Some time ago, richer countries agreed to contribute up to $100 billion to help the developing southern nations, deal with the effects of climate change. But this is almost looking at historical damage. And it's not a very popular thing with the northern countries. Many in Europe, the United States, and even Canada fear that this could be an unknown bill. So far, the only country in Europe that's actually agreed with the concept is Denmark, they've put in about $20 million, at least pledged it. But, you know, they worked late into the night on Saturday to try to get this issue, loss and damage, on the formal agenda. It is now, and so there's going to be discussions, and where they land, where they end up, we obviously don't know. But just getting this topic on the formal agenda here is even seen as a small victory. Heather.
Chris, thank you very much. Chris Brown live from Sharm el-Sheikh for us this morning.